Hi, I'm Andy Sherratt, and I'm delighted to be able to talk to you about the origins of my petrolhead nature. When I saw that this Revs limiter event was about origins and one of the suggestions was what made you a petrolhead, it was a really easy answer to me of what it was, because the answer to why I'm a petrolhead is my dad. And this is my dad. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about the influence my dad had, and in particular areas that led me to be the petrolhead that I am and have been pretty much all my life. Now, my dad's first car was an F-Type Magna MG, which I discovered relatively recently, still exists, but I've not managed to see it. I'd love to be able to see it for real, but haven't managed to do so far. But as a person, my oldest memory was of a Metropolitan that my dad bought, and I'll come back to this at the end as well. When I was about 2 years old, Dad had already decided that it was too rusty to use on the road in the days before MOT tests. But I do remember at age 2, for some reason, Dad had to move it from one side of the house where we lived to the other. And he took me and I sat next to him while he presumably reversed it off the drive, down the road and back on the other side. And so that's my first memory of life, was being in a car that already was not on the road. So that's where I started out. But also, a little bit later, although it had already been happening, I started reading Dad's Autocar magazines. When I was about 4, I couldn't read, but I could look at the pictures. Dad had bought Autocar since when he was 15, after the end of the Second World War, when it started back in print again, and he bought every issue of Autocar until he died, sadly. But he had every single issue. So whether I read the issue that was on my 4th birthday that covered, I don't think it actually covered the Triumph Spitfire, but featured it on the cover. Maybe I read the one about Le Mans, which had a Bentley on its cover, or possibly one that had a car that Dad did end up buying, an Austin 3 litre for the Motor Show edition. It was some point in 1967 I started reading Autocar, and it's something I still subscribe to. Autocar. Wednesday isn't Wednesday if Autocar doesn't turn up. I subscribe to many other car magazines, probably too many other car magazines, but again, it comes from Dad. And I've got lots of car books, as you can see. I've bought loads of books. So Dad bought and kept every copy of Autocar that he had. And when he moved from the last large house he lived in into smaller houses with my stepmum, for a while his collection of Autocar was at somebody else's house, but they needed the space, so we had to collect it. And Dad's collection of Autocar didn't just fill the back of a Citroën Berlingo once. There was a second collection required the day after to take them elsewhere. So we had lots of Autocars. I kept all of my Autocars, but moved house a couple of years ago, decided it wasn't fair to the joists of the house we were moving into to keep 30 years worth of Autocar magazines. So sadly made the decision to dispose of those and many of the other magazines I'd had as well. Kept quite a few, kept some important Autocars, but I do know they went to a good home. He might be watching, so thanks very much for taking them off me, Matt. Hope they've been interesting for you. The next thing that Dad probably did or was doing for me was buying me model cars. Dad bought me lots of model cars, and my brothers. We had at one point, I remember when I was about 12, 13, we had over 800 model cars between us. But Dad particularly bought me models of Minis. And when I was well in my 30s, and he was still buying me models of Minis, I'm not sure if these were absolutely ones he bought me or others, I remember him saying to me, if he'd have known what he was starting when he started buying them for me soon after I was born, he might not have bothered, but he still bought me any new Mini that he saw. I've got over 200 models of Minis, mainly Corgi, but also including some fantastic models by Polystill that I presume quite rare because I've not seen them anywhere else. But he didn't just buy minis, he bought all sorts. NSU R080s, for example, that must have had lights in it and takes a battery. I need to see if that still works. So I've ended up with 200 models of minis, and there are 2 minis outside of the house. He also bought me the Corgi model of the Lancia Fulvia Zagato. And that's a big reason why there's a Lancia Fulvia Zagato in my garage. And I still buy model cars too. There's one I bought this week just up behind me. So I'm still collecting models. It led into full-size cars as well. I helped Dad do body repairs on cars. We did lots of body repairs to a Mini that my mum had, regularly filling in rust as Mark 1 Minis rusted. And mind you, later ones do as well, as I know from what I've got. But I used to help Dad do the body repairs, do the mechanical repairs. He taught me to change wheels, how to do every other stud to even up the torque while you're tightening up the wheel nuts and undoing them and things. Taught me loads of stuff. And I gradually learned how much he found out about cars and knew. He told me the story of having to straighten the push rods on my granddad's car because he'd been driving it round the yard near the garage where my granddad kept it when my granddad was at work, before Dad was 17. And so he had to dismantle the engine and put it back together. So we did lots together, and it led to my getting, before I was 17, an Austin A30 that taught me to weld. I'm still not great at it, but taught me to weld. Dad helped me do that. And this photo is of me when I'd got it ready to take for its MOT. So that was my first car, was the A30. Couple of things about Dad and his cars though. Probably the best car Dad had was, and I suspect he'd say it as well, he had a Rover SD1 Vitesse twin plenum, genuine Rover factory twin plenum car. And when the production of the Rover V8 engine ended, Evo magazine ran an article in this one. It's got some fancy Porsche and a McLaren F1 on the front cover, but much more importantly, the article about the Rover V8 engined cars was in it, and the SD one they featured was my dad's. So Dad helped Evo, John Barker wrote the piece by lending them the car for the day for that. So that was a fantastic thing to happen. Dad was also into motorsport. When I was tiny and throughout my life, we had trips to circuits, rallies together. There's photos of me at places like Silverstone when I was only a year or two old. And so we used to go to those all of the time. Dad used to marshal motorsport before he had children. Marshalling is something I've done quite a lot of as well. He was a very active member of the MG Car Club. My mum and Dad used to rally in the Metropolitan. Used to do some road rallies in it in the days that you could just use an Austin Metropolitan to do that sort of thing. But we also went to Le Mans together. We didn't start going to Le Mans till far too late. We should have gone much more. So it became our annual pilgrimage. And my brothers and I still go, really hoping we can go back this year. That it takes place and the public happens. The T-shirt was a memorial one that we did for our Le Mans trip that the year Dad died. So I've had this massive journey with my dad in terms of cars, and he still inspires me for everything I do. So I just wanted to finish off though by saying that Dad was a petrol head and remembered details about cars right up till the end. He was also into tech and gadgets and things, so he was quite a user of Twitter and other social media. But literally just a couple of days before he died, I saw a tweet from 365 Days of Motoring that said it was 60 years that day since the Metropolitan had been launched. And so I retweeted it to Dad saying it must be nearly 60 years since you bought yours, Dad. And his reply to me was June 19th, 1958, cost £750. So to finish off my talk, I'll go back to the beginning and the Metropolitan and just say a really big thanks to Arthur Sherratt for turning me into the petrol head that I am. And thanks very much to Adam for inviting me. Hope you have a great day today.